Hey, this is Jim. So I did an interview with the ACE Report last night. If you didn't see that and you're interested, I talked about AMC, GME. I talked about DJT, GBUX, GNS, Finger. We also covered BB. We covered Bitcoin. I talked about my bearish outlook for gold in the short term, which is tracking so far. And then some other global macro stuff, a few little tips about different things that I look at as far as indicators for risk on, risk off in markets, market tops, market bottoms, sort of how they form, sector rotation, and a couple other things. So he's a good guy. If you don't follow him, you haven't subscribed to his channel, please do that. You can watch this here, or you can watch this on his channel. Either way, doesn't matter to me, but I wanted to repost this just because I have a little larger audience as far as people that get notifications on these videos. So here you go. This is our interview from last night.
I want to get right into this. BAM is here and he is well prepared. He's got all kinds of stuff he wants to share with us, and I'm really excited about this interview. So BAM, first of all, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. I appreciate the invitation, Ace.
Yeah, we love having you. And you're going to hear BAM's voice. I don't think you're going to see him at all, and that's okay. That's we're used to it. And then
we'll get the camera at some point here in 2025. It's just
we'll figure it
not
out.
my thing, but I'll do it.
No problem. So if you guys can't hear him or anything, just let me know in the chat. But BAM, I want to just start and we'll get right into it. This has obviously been the craziest start to a year economically, and with all the tariffs and Trump going after Powell. And so I just want to start by asking you, what are your thoughts on what we're seeing?
My thoughts are that it's eerily reminiscent on the charts and from my behavioral analysis perspective of the 1937 top, which is, not good news because we all know that led to the beginning of World War II and then finally our involvement and a long slog. That period there, the market topped in March of 1937. This is the Dow, and then traded down violently into the next year, March of 38, and then within a range grinding to the final low all the way into April of 1942. And then, of course, our involvement in World War II, and that ended up actually, rallying the Dow, but rough period. So I hope that's not what's going on. The other thing kind of concerns me is, I'm not a huge believer that AI is advanced enough yet to, at least the AI versions that I have access to are advanced enough yet to really be too reliable. But just for the hell of it, over the long weekend, I input a bunch of my sort of bigger picture forecasts for the, the S&P, gold, crude oil, things like that, the bond, 30-year bond into Grok. And I just asked the question, hey, if these markets end up tracking my model, both directionally and into these price targets into the future, in your opinion, what would the economic, political, et cetera, backdrop have to look like to create these types of price moves? And he came straight back with war with China.
Gosh, wow.
So, I've had situations before where my model's been super bearish. The market started to trade off, really sharply, 20% or so, and then turn around through Fed intervention and then monetary and fiscal stimulus, so both from the whatever administration's in power and the Fed, basically just turning on the dollar spigot. And changing things, adding some new data that at least fights against the existing bearish data. So, it's not to say what's in front of me is going to play out. But if the Fed decided not to come to the rescue because they don't like Trump or for whatever reason, and President Trump does decide to sort of bite the bullet here in a now or never kind of a moment.
Yeah.
Even though he would know intuitively, and his advisors would tell him, "Hey, this is not going to be good for markets and things like that." Then I guess some of this stuff could happen. I personally think we have no choice, and that we will come out of the other side better.
Mhm.
But it would be pretty ugly. So those are the two things, sort of from a macro perspective, that have my attention, and then we can dive into individual stock, commodity, currency markets, tickers, whatever you want to do.
Sure, sure. Let's stay on that just for a little bit more. I want to pick your brain just a little bit. Do you think that it'd be wiser for Trump to kind of just push it forward, get it over with while he's in control, and maybe while we're still close enough to the Biden administration so they carry some blame to get us on the other side so he can start rebuilding things?
I mean, I think he's way smarter than I am, so I'm not going to give him any advice. But based on history, what these guys typically try to do is take the pain early.
Hmm.
So it makes a lot of sense that he's doing what he's doing here right out of the gate, because then that gives him plenty of time for markets to recover toward the end of his administration, so that he's not he doesn't turn into a liability for whoever runs next, whether it's Vance or whoever runs
Yeah,
next.
yeah. Ha-
But that's typically what they try to do.
okay. Have you ever seen anything like this tariffs thing before? The volatility?
I mean, I've seen some nasty volatility in individual markets before. Um, Probably haven't seen this much overnight risk, because if you think about it, if we're having a battle inside the United States, and it's within our own Congress, or between the president and legislature, what happens is that news tends to come out at the same time during our waking hours. But what you
Mhm.
have here is, when we're asleep, then that's when China or someone else is going to make some tit for tat announcement. And so
Mhm.
you get these huge moves in the futures market, which then give you these huge gap up or gap down moves in the stock indexes. And, you know, that naturally makes people, back off on risk.
Yeah.
It makes the futures brokers increase margin, and so that all by itself, moves a lot of traders completely out of being able to carry overnight positions, right? Unless you have so much money that you're either not worried about that gap up or gap down against you,
Mhm.
or you have traders actively managing desks to where you can square things away. But I would imagine it's taken a lot of individual day traders, even that have decent account size, out of the mix for the time being.
Mm.
Um, Now, that can benefit counter trend moves after the open, because you think about all that money sitting in cash that would have been in a position
Mhm.
coming into the opening bell. So
Okay.
you can see fading of a spike to the upside, or fading of a big gap down move to the downside, as that sort of large retail money, or family office money, comes into the market. So that's the main thing, is just the violence of these overnight moves.
Do you think this is a way of shaking out some of the over leveraging?
I think it probably is, but I would guess that President Trump's main objective here um, is to fix this, what he views as being an unfair tariff situation.
Yeah.
So even though I'm sure he's not oblivious to markets. I mean,
Mhm.
the proof is the way he stepped in
Yeah.
when we were kind of free falling there during that down leg. But in my opinion, he's serious about trying to fix global macro problems with our country, and so I doubt he's sitting there sweating every price swing.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you well, okay, so speaking of leverage in the markets, from your perspective and what you're seeing, there's a lot of speculation out there, a lot of data that says that we might be in a bubble akin to what we were looking at with 2008 or '09, or even bigger. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, I agree. So one of the last things that I posted on my members service as we were heading into the all-time highs in stocks and just continued to grind higher. Now, in retrospect, we know those were fake economic reports by the Biden
Mhm.
administration, and then
Yeah.
also, just flooding the globe with liquidity.
Yeah.
So, I've studied the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is the only continuous stock average that I have access to, going back to the early 1900s.
Mhm.
But I have studied it. I built my model based on the Dow and studying the 21 to 1929 move, the Roaring Twenties into the 29 top, and then the crash that led to the Great Depression.
Mm.
So, in my work, this top that we just created was more extreme than any I've seen, more extreme than the 2000 high, more extreme than the 2007 high before the 0809 financial crisis. So the point there is, the takeaway is that President Trump unfortunately came into this and took the reins
Mhm.
against a backdrop of a market that wanted to give back pretty much what it's in the process of giving back right now.
Mm.
And
Okay.
then, after a potential move, a bounce move to the upside, then I would think we have even more pain to the downside to reflect any effect of the tariffs, if
Yeah.
there really is one. But this violent unwind that we just saw, that still doesn't even take all of the air out of the market that the Biden administration put into it. Just the
Sure.
fake move up.
Yeah.
Based on my data, at least that's what it looks like.
Are you watching, or have any concerns about the yen carry trade?
Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
it's top of the list. I track really carefully the U.S. dollar Swedish krona. That's the USD SEK
Mhm.
pair, and because I've noticed during any other financially stressful times, and when we're heading into a liquidity crisis, that you'll see um, velocity in
Mm.
those. So one of the things that some of your listeners might not know about history is that if you go back and you look at any period where markets are under a lot of stress, the biggest players, in other words, the people that end up being blown up in retrospect and being blamed for having an over leveraged position, and an irresponsibly large position in something, that then they have to unwind that. They're forced to unwind that position, and then
Mm.
that spills over into some unrelated markets, hits another person. They have to unwind, and that's why you see these violent unwinding moves in a lot of unrelated markets, where if we really, have a panic in the stock market to the downside, you can see violent moves in commodities.
Mm.
Somebody, might be too long, cocoa when it crashes. You never
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
But the sort of the thing that I've always thought in terms of is that velocity kills, speed
Mhm.
kills.
Sure.
So the people that are oversized in these positions have so many tools at their disposal that even in a short-term panic, as long as there's not high velocity of the price move, they can usually pick up the phone and find some kind of a hedge to
Mm.
sort of mitigate the open risk that they have, right? If they can't unwind a position that they're upside down in, they can at least find something that stops the bleeding and sort of, keeps the boat from capsizing.
Mhm.
But if you see really fast moves, in other
Mhm.
words, if you see a 10% move that takes 2 weeks, that's not a big deal. If you see a 10% move that takes 2 days, I'm
Mm.
not talking about in stocks, in certain markets,
Okay.
that like currencies and things,
Yeah.
and, there's no magic to that 10% number, but you get my point. It's
Mhm.
it's the violence and the quickness of a decent sized move that leaves them in a basically broke before they can even get the hedge on, or someone else can't figure out a way to make enough money for taking the risk to help them with that hedge. So that's the biggest risk with these violent moves and with the yen carry trade unwind. And
Okay.
so I like to look at that U.S. dollar Swedish krona. also for sort of violence and speed of movement, because that's what always happens before a big stock market event to the downside.
Mm. Is it, do do they have it in place now where it's a lot harder for those volatile moves downward?
Um, no, I mean I don't think we've changed the circuit breaker rules since the financial crisis, so I think they're the same.
Okay.
And by the way, even in the stock indexes, um, the last hour or the last half hour, I think it's the last hour. I haven't looked at the rules in a while, but is a free for all. There is
Mhm.
no, even if you were triggered three times during a session, and each time the trigger hits, they allow a little bit larger percentage move once the market's reopened. But
Mm.
that last hour, I'm pretty sure they take them completely off. So, um, you know, uh, there's just a lot of risk out there. And if you've ever watched the commodities markets during lock limit up or down moves, it is gnarly.
Yeah.
It'll lock limit, and then it opens for a nanosecond, lock limits again for that the rest of that whole day, and then opens again and lock limits. And I mean, that's when people are just being incinerated. Um, so I'm not seeing that yet.
Yeah.
Now, something I've talked about since 2021, really, or 2022, is that I was hoping that a liquidity crisis would spill over, or could spill over, and cause short covering in some of these heavily
Mhm.
shorted, meme-ish names.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I always said that, in my opinion, it would take a 5 to 7% move in the stock indexes minimum, to the downside before we would be able to test that theory.
Okay.
Because, if you have these controlled 2% and 3% moves that we've had over the past number of years,
Yeah,
that doesn't get it. That doesn't
yeah.
put enough stress on anyone,
Mhm.
especially, Kenny G and Dougie and these people
Sure.
who, you know, war planned, game
Mm.
plan through some of this stuff,
Yeah.
um, and can run simulations and everything else. But we finally got into that period right before President Trump stepped in with that stick save for the stock
Mhm.
indexes,
Yes.
and we really were pressing up against the percentage moves, especially in the Nasdaq,
Mm.
that I thought we could finally see. If we were going to be, if my hunch was going to be correct, that we'd start to see shorts actually go up
Mhm.
aggressively as stocks, especially um, tech stocks, dropped. But we didn't quite press hard enough to be able to see if that's going to work out or not. Now I do see a bunch of zones of strength in some of these meme-ish names, um, during certain dates in May, mainly mid to later in May, and then especially in June. Um, and my stock index model is bearish during that same period. So
Interesting.
unless one of those invert and turn out to be wrong, then
Mm.
that's our next opportunity to see if the meme stocks can trade opposite the major market averages during a sell-off.
Okay. So, I mean, and I think we saw a little bit of that in the way DJT's been trading the last few days since they made that announcement last week. It's really strengthened
So
in
that's more,
despite the
I
market.
view that more company specific because of that news flow. But what I'm
Okay.
referring to is, if everything else is equal and
Mm.
no one does any press releases, and all of a sudden 5 to 10 to 15 to 20 meme tickers start
Okay.
to scream 50 to 100% as the stock indexes are down 5 to 7%,
Mm.
that's what I'm kind of referring to.
Oh, okay.
Um, right?
Now, when you say 5 to 7%, do you mean in a day?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it has to be, yes, all these are it's in a day. It has to be, because as I said before, these guys can always handle this, and based on history, they can always handle the stress of any percentage move, really, if it unfolds slowly enough, right? They
Okay.
they just can readjust with hedges and everything else. But if it happens violently, um, and that varies from cycle to cycle, but based on what I saw in 2008 and what I've seen before, I think 7% is probably um, a decent guess at where I would be looking. And what I always do is, when I start to see the stock index sell off violently, I'll pop over to my little meme screen and just look at it and see if the red is starting to slowly turn green,
Mhm.
or if they're red, if they're barely, down a penny or 5 cents to where they could flip green quickly.
Yeah.
And I just haven't seen it, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Dow 7% a day right now would be about 3,200. That's a lot in one day.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but I think the fall of 2008, when we were moving through the Lehman news, I know there was a 7% day. I thought maybe they even allowed a 12 or a 13% day.
Oh, wow.
I don't think they'll ever allow a 1987 type event again, which was
Yeah.
21%
20.
in a
Yeah.
single day.
Mhm.
Um, I just think the plunge protection team would step in. Now, it'll be a really bad sign, by the way, um, if during the Trump administration, um, they do allow the markets, the major market averages, stock indexes, SPY, NASDAQ, whatever, to move down a greater percentage value than they did during the fall of 2008,
Mm.
because that would tell me that the plunge protection team, the banks don't have his back and they're trying to make him look bad. Basically, the deep state globalists are
Mhm.
trying to make him look bad and they're not going to help him. So if we ever start to see, something that starts to look more like 87 than 2008, that's when I'd be really worried that these guys are trying to purposely create a currency crisis that
Mhm.
would force different governments into the quick adoption, like overnight adoption of a central bank digital currency. And
Gotcha.
they've already built all this stuff behind the scenes, obviously.
Mhm.
So my fear is that it would turn into that Hank Paulson moment of 2008, where he literally walked into Congress with a single piece of notebook paper, supposedly with
Mhm.
a few little bullet points on it, and
Yeah.
just said, "Yeah, I need, whatever that number was, 870 billion, whatever that number was, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't give this to me, if you don't approve it, the global financial markets will totally collapse immediately."
Now that was was that TARP, or are you talking about the
Yeah,
Obama package in
yeah,
early
yeah. No, that
'09?
was TARP. That was Hank Paulson,
Yeah.
former CEO of Goldman Sachs, who then became the
Yeah.
Treasury Secretary under
The whole,
Obama.
we have to what Bush say? We have to go against capitalism to save it or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. It
Yeah.
was, and that's it's always like in the gnarliest moments is when they pull stuff
Yeah.
that they could never get away with in any other time, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Now, it would be interesting to me because if they don't save it, I mean, would that also maybe open up an opportunity? Because obviously that would mean big pain for our economy temporarily. But if it was actually allowed to go through, say, because Trump's in charge and he was able to like maybe put things in place and rebuild the right way, do you think that would
yeah,
it maybe even be a better cleansing, even though it'd be more painful
yeah,
temporarily?
there's a slight possibility. What I like is what Besant said, the new Treasury Secretary.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's Treasury Secretary, right?
Yep.
About it's Wall Street's had a great run. Now it's Main Street's turn, or it's the
Yes.
common
Yeah.
man turn, whatever he said.
Mhm.
So there is, I'm not an economist. I didn't even do a good job of studying when I was in school. So everything I've learned is kind of self-taught and outside of that world. But
Sure.
I know just from past observation that we have moved through periods where um, uh, the markets and the economy were working, better for Main Street than Wall Street, and then vice versa.
Mhm.
And we
Yeah.
have gone through this long period where it hasn't worked well for Main Street. It's worked
Yeah.
great for Wall Street. So, I don't know what that would look like. I don't know how hard Trump can pull on certain levers
Mhm.
that would hurt stock valuations, but yet through like targeted stimulus and
Mhm.
pro small business growth packages, like actually benefit the common man.
Yeah.
I'd love to see that. I don't know, that's outside of my wheelhouse, but yeah, I get it could be done if somebody knew, if somebody was smart enough.
Yeah, Trump did, he posted some really interesting this weekend, and he just randomly tweeted out, "He who has the gold makes the rules." And there's some conspiracy stuff on that maybe we're holding a lot more gold than we're led on to believe.
Hmm.
But But that would just be interesting if that's true. And there's some, I don't know. I only have speculations, but I know that our economy right now is mostly fake and just propped up. And obviously, Trump has a major. If I mean, obvious. There's so many other things, but if nothing else, I think his mandate is to leave us at the end of his 4 years with a real economy again, hopefully. And it's just going to be interesting to see how he gets there. Um, uh, if this happens, do you see? Well, not if this happens, but um, I've been hearing there's a lot of margin calls already that have happened at least during the instability. Do you think that this is if it's going to continue to put pressure on shorts, even if the market doesn't go as fast as 5 to 7%, but does keep going down? Like, is there a point of pressure? Say if the Dow got down to 25,000, even though it was going slow.
If there is, I've never observed it, and I don't know what that magic number is. There
Okay.
might be something out there, but really, um, the decline worked great for shorts. The decline allowed the shorts to just absolutely decimate stocks like Mullen. I've
Mm-hmm.
never, ever, ever seen a stock woodshedded that aggressively, you
Mm,
know, that quickly
yeah.
to take a stock down that severely on a percentage basis, have a reverse split and take it right back down again that violently. You
Mm-hmm.
just don't see that. And so, one of the things I learned when I did my when I did these recordings that I've done for, I did it for the DJT team,
Mm-hmm.
um, recorded the time and sales live to go back through after the market closed and really pick through things and try to figure out how the predatory algorithms work. Um, and I did it for GME, AMC, and a few other stocks. And one of the things that stood out was this thing called burst basket, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
these burst basket trades are simply um, a number of stocks. I guess technically it could be as low as just two tickers inside this basket, but then it could be 20, 50, 100, whatever. And it's basically a sell program or a buy program, and it's a burst, and then the entire basket is bought or sold at whatever percentage of each of those tickers that sit inside it. And so I can easily see on my different monitors when the S&P or the Nasdaq were getting hammered by aggressive sell programs, that these guys absolutely would use it as smoke screen, as cover to hit these heavily shorted stocks with burst
Mm.
basket sell programs and ladder attacks. And again, if you follow me on Twitter, I keep talking about if we just wanted to focus, if we could focus on one rule change,
Mm-hmm.
just change the rule back to the way it used to be, which requires an uptick to sell short a stock.
Yeah.
Um, and number one, it's easy to understand. It's very easy to go to Congress and say, hey, look, you guys, um, uh, this is a rule that already existed. The markets were fine when it existed,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to try to put an uptick rule in with a larger package of legislation that includes, like, getting rid of payment for order flow and on and on and on. I'm a huge fan of keeping things simple
Yeah.
and real strategic strikes that actually where you can score a win.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm telling you, this entire decline off the top has not only not benefited uh, the heavily shorted stocks. In other words, we'd never really hit that trigger point that, in my opinion, would cause a
Okay.
liquidity panic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it actually has allowed these big guys, these big market makers, to just abusively pound on these stocks with the burst basket sell programs.
Mm. Do you think that it's possible now that Paul Atkins is in as SEC that there's any way they might do a temporary short selling ban like they've tried in other countries?
I that would blow my mind. I don't think so.
Mm.
Um, just because we're so much bigger than these other markets that
Yes.
that can try different experiments. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we make a mistake,
Yeah.
it's a big mistake for everyone, not just us.
Sure.
Now, I could see him coming in and saying, and I wish he would do this, come in and say, hey, we're going to reinstitute the uptick rule
Mhm.
for the next 30 days and see how it works out.
Mhm.
That would be, you know, that would that would be bad news for a lot of these market makers that are running these abusive, predatory short selling algorithms.
Yeah.
And what makes it doubly bad is everybody probably remembers when Gensler came clean and basically said publicly, hey, we have a problem here where 70% or whatever percent, 50 to 70% of retail trades that are market orders are being executed in the off the lit exchange in the dark pools,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Well, these guys are able to you know, simultaneously dark pool any buying pressure while they pummel the tape with these burst basket ladder attack sell programs selling on downticks. It's just, of course you're going to win. You know, it's unbelievable how obvious this stuff is. But what I tried to do with the videos that I handed off to some of the people I was working with is
Mhm.
show them how it's almost like a ballet
Yeah.
where everything was working together, where these guys are, pulling all these different levers. It's not just one thing. They're really tricky about the way they do things. As a matter of fact, I know you're friends with Pedro.
Mhm.
He was one of the first ones to open my eye to the idea that um, these guys were the main people pushing these memeish stocks higher during the pump before they would execute the wash trade and the handoff and
Mm.
crash the stock back down again.
Yeah.
I always knew they were responsible for that last little push,
Yeah.
um, but I never really thought about this idea that the majority of that volume and the majority of that entire push is them from start to finish, and it's totally pre-planned. So in
Wow.
my mind, always in the past, and I think this is still the case sometimes, um, you'd have a heavily shorted name. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, it would start to move up beyond, a certain pain point.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden somebody gets a margin call, and then that margin call forces it up higher and bumps into another person's pressure point, and they get a margin call and it starts to, cascade to the upside. And
Mhm.
then the algorithms that I would watch would push it sort of like the Roman candle, the final little flare out at the top, because what they're trying to do there is they're trying to increase velocity right before they dark pool other buying activity and then ladder attack down, and then that breaks the technical setup and all the momentum indicators,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because if you can push price really high through a previous price high,
Mm.
but you start that fast market high velocity move from a low level in the momentum indicators like stochastics and RSI and MACD,
Mhm.
then based on where you're going to close that candle, let's say it's a 5-minute candle chart, if you push up on high velocity, pull down and close that candle with a real tall wick and an ugly looking, red body,
Yeah.
what you've done is you've trashed the momentum indicators, you've trashed the stochastics and MACD and RSI, you've created a bearish negative divergence, and then you can spend $1 million of your own money in your algorithm and another $10 million worth of short sellers that are authentic short sellers from day traders or just outright long side selling, um, join and jump on your bandwagon. So now you've
Mm.
weaponized an extra, $9 million, $10 million by using one.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so that's what they do. They game the algorithm, but I never really thought in terms of, the majority of the entire move from bottom to top
Mhm.
of a pump move actually being a pre-planned wash sale handoff like Pedro's pointed out to me.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if your listeners if he's explained it in detail, but the real easy way to describe it is, let's say you're heavily short of stock and you're naked, naked counterfeit shares. You said
Yeah.
you were going to, find a locate, and you didn't. and now you're up against a failure to deliver date, some hard date that they've come up with. Well, what you can do is, as you cover, right, creating one of those upside spiky pump moves that go up
Mhm.
50% in some of these tiny stocks, right? As you're covering and moving up, a person that works at your firm in a different building in a different country, or you have an arrangement with, they're shorting as you're covering your short. You're buying and they're reshorting it. So now you still have the pressure on that stock. There's still a million share short on the stock or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
But it's a handoff. It's literally, Pedro calls it the right pocket to the left pocket. So that's what's going on. And I never that never occurred to me. And I don't know if it was happening as much in the past 20 years as it has for the past 4, but I see exactly what he's talking about now. And then more importantly, I was able to take a look at the algorithm because I was then able to go back and look at my recording and
Mhm.
spend hours studying even minutes of trading activity instead of it just flashing through the screen. And I could see exactly how they would set things up to move the stock higher, basically build a head and shoulders pattern 9 times out of 10, and
Wow.
then ladder attack it off of that right shoulder, breaking down through the neckline.
Wow.
Um, but it's very obvious. And I think Trump and his new SEC secretary could very easily, just by reinstituting that uptick rule, totally break one of the most key components of this algorithm that I've tracked.
That'd be huge. Is the uptick rule, does it have to be passed by Congress, or can the SEC just reinstitute it?
I don't know. I would think the SEC can do this all by themselves. Good
Okay,
point.
because it's a regulation versus Congress.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I don't remember Congress passing that as a law.
No, no. Yeah, that was my bad if I said that. Yeah, no, you're right.
Well, I mean, that's even better.
SEC.
That's even
Yeah,
better.
exactly, exactly. And I wish, Nunez has done a great job
Mhm.
of, you know, being on interviews and basically calling people out and using the term counterfeit naked shorts, which, most of the other CEOs were afraid to do after they
Mhm.
went after Patrick Byrne and sued him
Yeah.
and made his life miserable.
Mhm.
But I wish I'd love to hear Nunez talk about specifically about the uptick rule. I would love to hear
Yeah.
him use that term. There'd be some people in diapers right after that conversation.
Well, from what I gather, I think Nunez is kinda learning on the fly, but I love that he's bold, and I would imagine that everything he's doing, he's gotta, Trump's probably gotta sign off on it before he goes public, being that Trump owns most of the company. And I wanted to ask you about that. What do you think about the fact that they have meme stocked DJT by shorting it down, and now he's president, he's owns most of the stock, and Pam Bondi's also got 100,000 shares, who's attorney general,
I
and
didn't know that.
Yeah, and Kash Patel served on the board, who's director of the FBI.
Wow.
So to me, that sounds like, I mean, if I'm them, I would feel like you'd have to be crazy to want to keep shorting DJT, knowing all that. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, you could make an opposite argument that if you wanted to tie their hands and go after them for, most of the time, I know the Treasury Secretary has to put, basically sell all their stock and put
Hmm.
it in some kind of a blind trust with someone else as the administrator.
Yeah.
Um, I'm surprised that, Bondi and Trump and all these people are allowed to, well,
Well, I
Bondi
know.
especially, I'm surprised she's allowed to own that particular individual stock. But anyway,
Yeah.
you could, you know, the globalists they're not dumb. They're
Hmm. Oh
evil, but
yeah.
they're not dumb,
Yeah.
and they play that Machiavellian game really well,
Yeah.
um, setting someone up, right?
Hmm.
Setting someone up to walk into a trap.
Sure.
So, I don't know. You can make an argument that um, they short the stock, and if the administration appears to be sticking up for their
Yes.
personal stock,
True.
more than they should be. I mean, these guys will file a frivolous lawsuit no matter what. So
Oh yeah.
that could
Yeah.
happen anyway. But I mean, that's the only thing I could think of.
Hmm.
But Nunez, wasn't he on the finance committee?
He
He
was
should know.
he was intelligence committee.
Oh,
He was the
intelligence.
head
Okay.
of the intelligence committee, and then he even got a small role in the current administration. I can't remember what it is, but yeah, I know Trump put his stock in a trust, and maybe Bondi did too. I just know that she did have that. But and you're absolutely right. And actually, this has been my argument to a lot of people who've been wanting Trump to do more before the SEC chair came in. And one of my arguments was that it would look like what you're saying. It could look bad, but now with the SEC chair in, they could just do stuff through him without
I mean,
having to go
the
public
stock,
about it.
the stock's the most bullish it's been. Um, there have been specific zones of strength in my model
Hmm.
and zones of weakness and things that showed, an actively trading stock and really nice upside targets. You and I have
Hmm.
even talked about some of these in the past,
Yes. Yeah.
but this is the first time that the stock has shown so many consistent, persistent zones of strength in the future in my work. So,
Mm.
I think I put this number. I don't know if I put this number out on Twitter or not, but I did with my members.
Hmm.
But I think DJT can trade back up to the hidden retest level at $88 this year.
Wow. Well, that'd
So,
be huge. Yeah,
um,
it's very bullish. It's at
yeah,
24 today or just under
yeah.
24. So that's a big move.
There, there's
The
there's one more little period here in May
Mhm.
that sort of has my attention market wide. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the entire stock market continued down into May, into sort of a panic moment.
Mhm.
Um, and DJT has a hidden retest at $18 and one at like 20, I think. But that's not a tremendous decline from here,
Yeah.
even if it were to happen. So really, what I told my members is it's a buy the pullback type setup. Pick
Mhm.
your pivot levels, pick your price levels. I tend to like to use my hidden retest levels instead of pivots.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of times they're like below or above a pivot, so it saves you a little bit of money on the entry.
Yeah.
Um, but in general, it looks to me like it is going to be a winner this year, irrespective of what the rest of the market does and the stock indexes end up, looking like.
Wow, that's pretty huge. So, going forward, just on a macro level, do you see like that there has to be some sort of correction in the market and economy before it really starts taking off?
I mean, I don't have a setup where it's taking off. My
Okay.
setup is like, I don't even like to talk about it too much, but I kind of hinted what Grok said when I fed in my
Yeah.
forecast to him. And then I told
Mhm.
you when we started the call that this looks most similar, as far as a setup, to the 1937
1937. Wow.
top in the Dow, which was a grinding, right? It wasn't a 1929
Mhm.
30 crash. It
Yeah.
wasn't an 87 crash. It was a, kind of a nasty first leg down and then, bouncing and just
Mm.
grinding for years lower.
Okay. Was that
There's
kind
a
of a
window.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, would that be kind of a controlled demolition?
The you know, I think if the plunge protection team, which is your listeners can look it up, they're called
Mhm.
the oh man, what are they called? Their technical name,
I can't
Working Group
remember.
and Financial Markets, something like
Yeah.
that, right? But
Mhm.
we all call them the PPT, plunge protection team. If those guys are working in Trump's best interest, then yeah, all declines end up being what I would call controlled demolition, grinding
Mm.
declines. You know, they'll, what I've noticed in the past is if, let's say, the Fed or anyone else that's involved in the financial market sees a specific sector that they think is too complacent. So, like,
Mhm.
let's say AI or just tech in general, and you always have a new group of young people that come into the market and they've never
Mhm.
had their front teeth knocked out,
Sure.
before.
Sure.
And so their ears are pinned back and they're just buying every single dip. I have seen sometimes where they'll specifically target a group, a sector, and let it get way more bloody than the Dow or some of the other indices.
Mm,
But they're strategically doing it purposely to sort of send a shot across the bow to just prevent complacency.
mhm.
Um, but in general, in the past, they've always wanted to do stair-steppy type declines. And, because they know the financial system is so overly leveraged that if they allow X percent move to take place in one day or 24, 48 hours, that
Mhm.
for sure it's going to uncover some disaster. So I
Okay.
think that's the reason they do it.
What would
And
be
then there's
this?
this thing called jawboning, that the Federal Reserve used to do, where
Yes.
they literally would guide interest rates in the publicly traded market,
Mhm. Yeah.
um, to sort of hover around where they wanted in between meetings if they were going to raise rates or lower rates.
Mhm.
A lot of people miss that fact that the market controls this stuff at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why sometimes you hear people say the Fed is behind the curve when all of a
Yeah.
sudden the bond market, or, in this case, everybody focuses on the 10-year note and that
Mhm.
5% yield magic number.
Yeah.
If they trade inverse. So if they're selling off, rates are going higher. If they're rallying, rates are moving lower.
Mhm.
So, you
Yeah.
inevitably get some of that jawboning where they're trying to just control prices, and they love ranges, right? Like,
Mhm.
especially if you're trying to work your way through a problem.
Yeah.
Like, let's say there's a war, there's whatever this tariff, um, uh, the tariff negotiations we're going through right now.
Mhm.
They would love if they're on President Trump's side. The
Yeah.
people that pull the levers, the people at the trading desks of the major banks, the PPT, the Fed, they would love to give him as a gift a trading range, right?
Mhm.
And it can be fairly violent. They'd prefer 2 to 3% moves. They want Wall Street to make money. They want traders to trade. Need everybody to be happy. They don't want crickets and a flatlining market, but they'd love to have a range if they're trying to help him. And that's why I keep saying to people, if you see the markets, selling off wildly and them not helping him, that's the first sign that, they're against him. Now, the
Okay.
fact that President Trump was the one that had to step in and stick save the market is
Yeah.
not a good sign.
Interesting.
And I believe that's why he's publicly going back and forth with Powell right now,
Okay.
because he knows they're trying to, hang him out to dry.
Okay.
And why
Interesting.
wouldn't
Yeah.
they?
No, I mean, that makes sense. It is
They
to
tried
me.
everything. Why would they want to go support him in
Well,
the
that's true.
financial markets, especially
Yeah.
a president who's talked more about the price, the levels of the S&P in the market during his last term than any other president ever.
Oh,
No
yeah.
one does that.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Absolutely.
that's his
Now,
Achilles heel, and they know they can hit him there.
well, my theory on it was just because the setup is, coming into this year. I mean, you said it earlier, but what the Biden administration did with the stock market and the economy was just egregious lies. It was insane what they were doing, the way they were relying on the jobs reports and,
Right, right.
you
Those
know,
adjustments, right? Unheard of.
yeah, the way and selling the treasury bonds and just, I mean, you could tell, and then the Fed cuts right before the election. You could just tell that they were just keeping everything pumped up. And my own theory was that one way or the other, even if it was Kamala who got in, they were still going to let the economy tank. But with Trump, it would be to try to destroy him. With Kamala, it'd be to let them rebuild, and you run in maybe CBDC and whatever else they want to do, because they didn't get everything they wanted from COVID. But I think it just all looked like the setup to trash our economy one way or the other, and our stock market. But I think it's interesting that it does seem to be all the worst people who are the maddest at Trump for all this tariff stuff. So I do wonder, if Trump. Sometimes I tend to I tend to lean on the optimistic side that maybe he's even ahead of them, because he's outsmarted them plenty of other times. So that's some of my hope. But I think at some point, like you said, it's your model's trending it down. I don't think there is a way to get out of this without pain. Let me say that. But I'd rather it
Yeah,
happen
and
on his watch.
he's been handed a bill from people in the past. Now he's spent a lot of money also,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
this isn't like, this isn't the typical Republican Party
Mhm.
fiscal conservatives. They
Sure.
haven't been my whole lifetime. So I think
Yeah.
that whole thing was sort of a charade from
Yeah,
the
it
start,
was.
right? But but it's I think he knows, and the fact that Elon, is a numbers guy and a smart guy, and he's basically come
Mhm.
right out and said this is not sustainable. That that
Yeah.
they know.
Yeah.
Now, the sovereign wealth fund idea I think is really interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and it's one of the arguments I've had with people in the past, that when you look at and I'm not saying the deficits are good, or that the debt in particular is
Sure.
good. It's obviously
Sure.
horrible.
Yeah.
But if you were to view our entire country as an asset, I mean, based on its assets and the
Mhm.
value of those assets, and you look at the land and the oil under the ground, and on and on and on, you
Yeah.
know you 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 get to the point where, if it's a business, you'd say, man, that balance sheet doesn't look bad. It's like, you're fine.
Yeah.
um, and so but I like what they're doing with this. I think they know this sovereign wealth fund and
Mhm.
rolling real assets into it, right? The
Yeah.
gold, the value of the timber. And by the way, if you manage timber properly, the type of timber that goes into toilet paper and paper and things like that, not the old, you know 140-year-old trees that obviously you cut those down. It's a big deal, but you're using those
Mhm.
for, to build some incredible, solid wood, whatever. But just the littler trees that are used all the time for things that we recycle, you cut those every 16 years, right?
Mhm.
And that's healthy,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And so, if you look at the timber we have, and the land we have, it's not necessarily a bad thing to set aside a portion of it. But even if you don't want to do that, just my point is that sovereign wealth fund gets to basically say, hey, this is what backs our currency.
Mhm.
Especially if they put something on the blockchain, and
Yeah.
right, to try to
Yeah,
make it look
absolutely.
less like a empty fiat.
Mhm.
You know.
So, at what point do you think this actually could be painful for the Kenny G's of the world and the Dougies?
I think the next moment of truth comes in June.
Okay.
Um, and it's pretty interesting from a number of perspectives. You can see, Basent said, hey, this is going to be rocky until June. He mentioned
Mhm.
June specifically, remember?
Mhm.
Um, and, you know, uh, I don't think these guys are too worried about the political class on Wall Street. Most of them are Democrats anyway,
Sure.
right? So I don't think that they care too much about what happens to like the Mag 7 and some of these other stocks, until and unless it starts to weigh real heavily on Main Street.
Yes.
But I think they must think that they have some plan.
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, I think, if they do this properly, um, that June could be a pretty interesting time from a number of perspectives. And you've got the DJT news. That's really big in the background now.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Even though I know it's not like business news, but that announcement being from such a major, I mean, because DJT is not a major company, but it's a major stock because of the names attached to it.
Exactly.
And I just think that, because again, I think that if there's a statement like that, to me, Devin Nunes isn't making that statement unless Trump has signed off on it. And it's almost like, in my opinion, a way of Trump saying, like, I see what's going on here, in a way. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of people would read it that way.
Yeah. And we can use our stock
Hmm.
and the verbiage in our um, letter that we send to the SEC as a shot across the bow for
Yes.
all of those other stocks. So yeah, it's nothing but
Hmm.
wind at the back for these other memeish stocks. Now
Yeah.
the biggest problem, I was just talking to Pedro about this yesterday, is the amount of damage that's been done to these meme stocks, the amount of covering that's taken place
Sure.
for dilution, reverse splitting, or
Mhm.
both, has taken a ton of potential upside out of almost every stock on the list. And I could
Yeah,
go,
yeah.
like, even I can make a good argument that, what Ryan Cohen's done with GME,
GameStop, yeah.
even though, um, you know, 20 years from now, we could, uh, Ryan Cohen might be the new Warren Buffett,
It
right?
that's so funny, Bam. That's exactly what I've been saying. That's what he wants to do. He told us he wants to do that.
Okay.
And
So, and you saw Carl Icahn
mhm.
coaching him up in his ear.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, he was somebody talked to him. He was forced to do what he's been doing.
Yeah.
And if you want to own the stock long term, or you're an active trader, even a swing trader, and
Mhm.
you're interested in catching, $20 moves,
Yeah.
here and there, over and over within a range,
Yeah.
I think, to me, that's a great way to play this stock, buy that lower end of the range and try to catch those catalyst moves to the upside.
Yeah.
If I'm completely wrong and one of these days all of a sudden it just melts up, I don't see it. It looks more contained now than it did before. Then
Yeah.
great, you're already long, but you're not sitting there in it up and down and up and down and up and down with dead money,
Mhm.
um, because you believe in this MOAS thing, right?
Yeah,
That I've never
yeah.
talked about, that I don't really like it because it just sets unrealistic expectations to
Mhm.
people. But anyway, so that one looks to me like, you know, if you think about it, there's this big pool of money that's sloshing around inside these different stocks that we call memes, whether
Mhm.
you want to call this, GME a meme stock at this point or not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a legit company, obviously, with a bunch of cash. So, but just to keep things simple, this whole basket of memes, if you think about the money that sits inside the stocks that people have been the most focused on, like a
Mhm.
GME, I
Yeah.
think that if it starts to trade within a range and more people start to understand that it might be, that you might not get that 1,200% home run that you've thought in the back of your mind over the past 3 years you were going to get. I think
Mhm.
some of that money can find its way over into DJT and,
Sure.
and some of the more active uptrending type stocks. And,
Yeah.
you know, that
Yeah.
wouldn't be a bad thing.
Absolutely, no, not at all. And I mean, I completely agree with you on GameStop. The fact that he diluted the last 3 times, all when it was geared up to run
Yeah,
each time or was
exactly.
running. I mean, it kinda
Exactly.
told me that he's purposely crushing a short squeeze, by
Yeah.
doing that.
That was the first time that last little, the timing of his last move was
Oh,
very,
yeah.
Adam
Adam Aaron-ish.
Aaron-ish.
I mean, the difference to me is that at least it seems like Ryan Cohen's actually building something where I don't know what
Yeah, I
Adam
agree.
Aaron's doing.
I agree. I said timing wise, it
Yeah,
was like,
exactly. It
right?
was.
I
It
have this
was.
Adam Aaron PTSD, and my eye started to twitch. It was like had taken a vaccine.
Yeah, me too. I mean, yeah, I was in AMC for 2 years. I lived that life. That was actually how I got into all this, and thank God I letting go of AMC was one of the best things for my mental health ever, a couple years
I,
ago,
I, I
so
have no choice. I told everyone I'd stick with it, but
yeah.
it is the most destructive, for your well being. It's the most
Mhm.
destructive situation I've ever been involved in. Because any other situation I've been involved in, I've been
Mhm.
able to cut the cord. I
Yeah.
mean, whether it's in the financial market or personal life, anything, I've been able to cut the cord.
Mhm.
But I told everybody I'd stick with it, and I'm going to. But it's just heartbreaking to watch
Oh, yeah.
Adam Aaron continue to prove what I sort of thought, but I didn't want to
Mhm.
really believe.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I sat in the second row when he visited San Francisco, and
Mm.
he's just like this, goofy old dude in his wrinkled
Sure.
suit with his baggy khakis, and
Yeah.
he's like Elmer Fudd, and I'm like, man, this guy seems like a believable guy. He just doesn't come across as that super
Sure.
slick Gordon Gecko that
Yeah.
you don't want to turn your back on. But
Mhm.
then through his actions over and over and over and over again, I'm finally come to the realization, and then I finally decided to say something publicly, and obviously that made me a super unpopular guy and attacked by everybody. But I mean,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Well, he's duped a lot of people and is still thinking that he's, a lot of people holding that stock thinking that he's doing the right thing overall. He's playing 4D chess of some sort, but
So
sad.
I think we can see something really nice in June
Mhm.
in AMC. And as a matter of fact, I'm about to do something that I think is going to be a pretty interesting experiment where I offer to my email list that I have of all my past subscribers from
Mhm.
a long time. Um, I offer them a deal where I give a discount. I won't go into the details of that part of it, but basically what I'm going to do is turn around and I'm going to buy AMC calls and a certain strike and a certain expiration um, with the majority of the money that comes in.
Mhm.
And if I double it, I'm giving everybody their money back and they get
Oh,
to
that's
keep the
awesome.
1 year subscription of Global Pro, my like all in product for
Love
free.
it. Oh, that's awesome.
Because the other day I was trying to figure out how can I make this fun? Because like you said, this is miserable. This is
Yeah.
absolutely miserable and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, I know it's going to continue to suck.
Yeah.
So how can I make it fun? Like interject a couple waves of fun in between the tsunami of suckiness.
Mhm.
And
That's a
and so
that's
this
a
is what
great
I came
idea.
up with. I don't know. I think it'll be fun, and hopefully
Yeah.
I don't get embarrassed. I think it'll work.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I think that's great. Well, since we're on the meme stock, talk, what are you seeing anything interesting in, any other specific ones?
Yeah, I can go down the list real quick.
Yeah,
So
let's do it.
DJT, $88 hidden retest target during 2025.
Okay.
GBUX has a retest up at $7.60.
Okay.
And I talked to Pedro a little bit about it today. I don't go into the details of the warrant
Mhm.
and all the rest of that, but there's some significance to that $4 level, obviously. So it looks to me like it wants to kind of cycle between four, but move from $7.60 is worthwhile if that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
GNS, interesting that it made an April Fool's low.
Mhm.
And so this one looks like, nothing too crazy, but GNS looks to me like it could double or more. And
Okay.
so that's kind of worth participating for me, especially down here at the 25 cent level or whatever.
Sure.
Finger, I've got retested $1.90 and 620.
Okay, 620,
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah. And I've got zones of strength late May and then June. And
Okay.
so, uh, you know, if it starts to track and moves up to that $1.90 hidden retest um, into this May zone of strength, then that would actually set it up to see a high velocity move to hit that 620 target as early as June.
Oh,
That's really interesting. Um, and then one of the other thing that's most interesting about Finger to me is it doesn't have this massive MOAS look to it. Like,
mhm.
the whole reason I chose AMC back in 2021 in
Yeah.
April was because I went through all the tickers and I literally
Mhm.
modeled all of them from GME to cost to AMC to right down the list. Some of them don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And AMC was the most bullish looking for that second move, right? And
Wow.
that turned out to be true. GME rallied 280%, AMC rallied 700 or 800%.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to use the same kind of critical eye on my entire list of memes as we trade toward what I think can be a really nice period during June.
Mhm.
And one of the things I noticed is that Finger doesn't have any of what I call a wet blanket algorithm. It just means that it's like a preset algorithm that just has been running for years or months. And it's waiting for price to get to certain levels. And it's just going to whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole, whack-a-mole. And so what Ryan Cohen's done to GME has created some of those. What Adam Aaron
Really?
has done to AMC has created a tremendous number of those, right? So
Yeah.
we still have these upper hidden retest levels that I can shoot for in GME, $31. And when it was trading 20, that's decent move, right? It's
Mhm.
worth participating. And then, like I say, maybe it does take off. Maybe I'm wrong, and there's some event that can bust price right through this wet blanket algorithm. It does happen occasionally. But when you have like, 12 of them running at different time frames, like AMC does right now,
Yeah.
it just starts to make the stock look like, yeah, maybe you can move to $20, but
Mm.
that's a big move percentage
Oh, it's
wise,
huge, yeah.
right? But even to get us back to where I thought we could move to prior to Adam Aaron doing what he's done over the past 12 months, I
Mhm.
thought we could go back to um, the ape pounce levels. So
Yeah.
reverse split adjusted, that'd be $180 to 210.
Wow.
But I mean, if you look at that as a percentage gain now, you know, can that happen? Yeah. How many
Wow.
years would it take? Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. 4, 5, 6, 10. I don't know. But
Mhm.
as far as just violent moves that can unfold the way the 2021 event unfolded,
Yeah.
which that's a lot of fun. I like forecasting that stuff. I like being involved in that stuff.
Sure.
I don't like watching paint dry. Um, as far as AMC goes, it has so many of these wet blankets that, it's like I said, it's fairly limited. But what caught my eye with Finger again was it does not have any wet blanket algo running at any time frame.
Wow.
So although I don't have any crazy upside targets, I
Yeah.
do have this 620, which is a big deal,
Yeah.
and nothing holding it back. It's like blue sky
Wow.
setup. So
That's
maybe all of a
amazing.
sudden this one really surprises me,
Yeah.
or generates some new bullish data that I don't see right now.
Wow.
The next one I have on this list is oh yeah, one final comment on Finger. It does have congestion from what I call my vibration level, at 725 and $9.15.
Okay.
So it's not doesn't have a clear cut melt up setup in my work, but
Okay.
a move to 620, and even if it were to run into congestion between $7 and $9 is still a big deal.
Yeah,
But if
that'd be a
that does
huge move.
happen, it would have to spend quite a bit of time in that 7 to 9 range before it wanted to go crazy based on my stuff.
So if it got
AMC,
up there, basically just to just congest that all to a summary, if it got up to 7-9 area, you see that it would vibrate there for a while and kind of
yes,
power up, and then it could blast,
exactly.
possibly.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. It could build a new base up at that level, but it would
Okay.
trade there for weeks or months, most likely,
Okay.
based on where this data comes from. Like,
Gotcha.
if I have a vibration level in my 5-minute price bar model, you're talking about it might need to spend 15 minutes to 5 hours
Okay.
vibrating. But
Okay.
if I'm getting this data from a weekly, price chart, like I am in Finger,
Yeah.
weekly price bars or daily, then you're talking about weeks or months. But you've got it exactly right. It could build a new base at that level.
Mhm.
As far as
Okay.
AMC goes, it finally hit the hidden retest down at $2.55. Has bounced a little bit since, but it's still and I consider it an active vibration level at 255. Um, I think probably the major market averages and most of these the list of meme stocks I track are vulnerable to further decline or at least sideways chop into May.
Mhm.
But then, like I said, June sets up really nicely. So what I'd love to see with AMC is maybe a little more time spent between current levels and call it 255 to 320, and then setting up for that beautiful June zone of strength to where I could start to talk about some more interesting price targets. GME we already talked about. I've got this hidden retest at $31. And then quite a bit of congestion up around 35 or 40, but that's still a nice move.
Mhm.
Um, BB has a hidden retest up at $5. So nice move from the threes. Um, Most importantly with BB is the fact that it is very, very bullish in my long-term model.
Really?
And longer term, meaning over the coming years. I've got a retest at $50 and another one at $114. And I really believe that will pan out.
Mm.
I think the companies, completely reinvented themselves, obviously, and it's just going to take a while for uh, the fundamentals to drive it. Now, I think that one was probably one of the most heavily shorted and still probably has a systemically risky, uncoverable, naked counterfeit short position hidden in it that you
Mhm.
won't see published. So that one also has the added benefit of, in addition to being a turnaround story based on the fundamentals, that if we did have a market event that spilled over and forced short covering, a reduction of margin on the short books of major firms, BB is one that could all of a sudden, be trading 10, 20, 30, $50, whatever.
Wow,
Um,
really?
yeah, yeah, in my opinion.
Wow. Okay. It hadn't been on my radar in a while.
Yeah, I mean, it had that really nice move, and then the earnings call went really well. They
Mhm.
sold that IP and brought in a big chunk of money. They're in a position to actually post positive, earnings.
Mhm.
Um, and the CEO mentioned something about, using some of that cash to reinvest in the stock. Now, it was decimated from, $6 back down to where it is now. But that, if you talk to Pedro, he'll explain exactly mechanically why that happened. That had everything to do with the end of the quarter mark that these large funds have to do, and these market makers and everybody else, when they have to you know either have a certain amount of carry a certain amount of dollar amount of risk in the case of
Mhm.
like a market maker,
Yeah.
or in the case of a hedge fund, they're actually marking to market at the end of the month, end of the quarter, and their investors are very interested in seeing that. And so if all of a sudden a short like BB had moved, some huge percentage against them, that raises eyebrows. And so it looks like they pummeled that stock back down into end of quarter, even though they let it run to $6, $7, wherever it went. So that's that one. I really don't have a lot of other stuff to pass along as far as individual stocks.
No,
I can.
that's okay. That more than covers most of the stocks we usually talk about on this channel. Um, so that's great. I mean, that's just great information. What were you else about to say?
If you want to shift back over to sort of global macro,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can make
let's do
some
it.
really quick commentary on the
Mhm.
Dow transportation average,
Yes.
gold, Bitcoin. Okay. Um, so one of the things that I think is if people care, like especially if you have some people in your audience who like to dabble in technical analysis, to just
Mhm.
learn more about sort of market cycles, what it looks like when a bear market's forming a bottom, what it looks like when a bull market's forming a top.
Yeah.
You tend to get sector rotation and risk on or risk off, and all these different
Mhm.
things that are typical based on history and usually repeat. So one of the things that I think is an interesting point as far as the violence of this move off of the recent all-time highs in the stock indexes
Mhm.
is that the advantage to following, like I was, what little bit I was taught outside of my own thing that I do, I was taught by some really smart old timers. They're all dead.
Hmm.
And so they were the ones that always stressed how important it was to look at, a bunch of different major market averages. So you look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average, you look at the, NASDAQ Composite, you look at the Russell 2000, you look at the Dow Transports, right? You look at the utilities, everything.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at the Dow Transports, um, and you think in terms of, like again, most people think that you're not going to get a violent move directly off an all-time high, and that typically is true. 1929 was the exception. You
Yeah.
crash straight off the top.
Mhm.
But in 1929, we didn't have the advantage of having 10 different indices you could look at to look for divergences. We do have that advantage now. So this last move to all-time highs and the violence of the move off that high shouldn't catch people by surprise if they're paying attention to the Dow Transportation Average. The
Mm.
Dow Transports topped way back on November 5th of 2021. Okay.
Wow.
So they've been diverging, in a range all this time. And then even as the SPY was still fairly close to all-time highs, the transports had been selling off aggressively. And, they're all already back down to the October 2022 levels now.
Wow.
Right. So
Yeah.
I like to watch the transports. I like to watch the Russell 2000, which is the IWM, for people that want to track the ETF. Um, I think it's I think it's important to track those things. One of the best things in an old timer. He was actually ran his own market making firm. He's still alive. Um, Sold the firm to B of A, but he opened my eyes to the IBB, the biotech index,
Hmm.
and the professional traders tend to watch the IBB as a risk on, risk off barometer. And so if you see the IBB, trading green, looking healthy in a nice uptrend, making higher highs, higher lows, um, there's more confidence to a bullish trending, potentially trending move in the S&P. Whereas if you see a divergence, you see the IBB has been selling off for 2-3 days. It's red while the major market averages are green,
Hmm.
new highs within an uptrend for the past 4 or 5 days. You got to be a little bit skeptical if you want to view markets the same way the real hardcore old timer pros do.
Mm.
So that's a little nugget there for
That's
people.
interesting. That's good
Yeah,
to know.
they want
One
to.
thing I keep hearing a lot of older traders say is that a lot of the new people who've come in the last 10 years have never really seen a true bear market before. So they might have been really good at trading right now, but they don't have any idea how to get through what's coming.
Yeah,
So
and you want to know something that's true. And it sounds bizarre, it sounds counterintuitive, but when you think through the process, you understand why they do it this way. Is Wall Street at the major trading desks, it's more and more automated now, but it was, there was a bunch of traders sitting at desks, and
mhm.
they tended to hire ex college football players and lacrosse players,
Really
fairly alpha dudes, and always rotated young guys onto the desk during bull markets because they didn't have the PTSD that the old timers have, and so they were able to pin their ears back, buy every dip,
interesting.
and just pedal to the metal, and this is great, and just
Oh
long,
wow.
long, and longer. Whereas the old timers literally couldn't bring themselves, couldn't force themselves to
Oh
participate in the last 10 to 15% of the bull run, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's funny, but it's true. Wall Street always brings in a fresh crew of guys. They know they're going to get their
Mm,
heads ripped off at some point, but
yeah.
they also know that they'll make them more money being aggressively long into the top
Really?
than they will lose on the shock to the downside typically,
That
right?
is
There might
so
be a
interesting.
5% difference where the
Yeah.
old timer sat out the last 15%, and the
Yeah.
young guy gets his teeth kicked in on the first 10% of the rollover.
Oh my
They
gosh.
still made an extra 5%.
Wow. That makes so much sense to me now why always in the movies and stuff, the Wall Street guys are always so, like, bro-ish.
Oh yeah.
They
No,
have that
they
jock energy.
yeah, that's what they target, and that's what they want, and that's what they get.
I never knew that. That's
And then the
fascinating.
quants are the exact opposite. The quants are these, dudes that are on the spectrum for sure, if not completely off of it. And then, rocket scientists, physicists, and on and on. Like,
Yeah.
Rentech, Jim Simmons' company. That those are, that's what you would find if you wandered into that place.
That's so
Um,
interesting.
right?
Wow. So, real quick, there's are you seeing anything interesting in crypto?
Yeah. You know, uh, I actually thought Bitcoin would probably flush one more time to retest
Mhm.
68,000
I saw your tweet on that.
before. So I finally flipped and said, hey, I'm in the buy the pullback mode. But it still looks to me, I just don't love it in
Mm,
front of this big zone of strength that I have on the board.
okay.
So what I'm looking at right now is there's an upside hit and retest at 98,150.
Okay.
We're close enough to that to where we could go and take care of that. We're at 92.8 right now.
Mm,
But um, it looks to me like we still have another move back down within this, grinding range we've been in
yeah.
during May, maybe even very, very early June. But then my July is super bullish, and then
Okay.
I believe August and even September can also see a continuation move to the upside if I have this right.
Mm.
But I just, you know, I sort of love that 73 to 83,000 range.
Mm.
If it gets kicked in the teeth one more time here during May, maybe even early June.
Okay.
Um, so that's sort of what my model would do. So totally comfortable buying that 73 to 83,000. I know that's a huge range, but
Mhm.
unless I'm looking at it in real time, that's as good as I can do. Um, but then it still looks to me like this will turn out to be a big consolidation period, and that by July, like say heading into July 4th, that it can be trading all-time highs
Oh,
and
wow.
then can continue, up toward the 120, 130, 140 type numbers that people were
Wow.
talking about,
Okay.
3 months ago, 4 months ago
Yeah.
when it dropped, as we moved into July, August, September. Then I believe my model gets pretty bearish again, um, after into October, after October, but I need to update it as we move closer to that
Yeah,
period.
sure, absolutely. Do you track any others like XRP or Ethereum?
Um, I do, but I have not had a chance to update Ethereum before this call, so I don't really want to say anything.
That's fine.
Um, but yeah, I do forecast Ethereum for the BAM service for the crypto.
Okay.
Um, let's see what else.
Uh,
Gold is in. I actually went a four full unit position trader model short gold here recently, and it came off $100 pretty quickly. So far that's working.
mhm.
It looks to me like gold wants to move down to a hidden retest at $3,035. So
Okay.
gold's trading
3,400 some, right?
380 right now.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would be not too huge, but a decent decline. Three
Mhm.
four hundred dollars off the all time high.
Sure.
Um, and that would be that can happen violently. That can happen literally during the rest of April or very very early into the first week of May.
Wow.
Gold can be sitting at 3,035. Um, and then I'll have to take another look at it after that. But um, there's a chance that after that, gold can turn around and melt up to between 5,000 and 5,500. But I
Oh
just need
my
to
god.
one step at a
Wow.
time. I need to look at it. Yeah, it's a really either or violent setup in my work
Yeah.
where if it literally wouldn't have stopped exactly a day ago where it did
Mhm.
start to
Yep.
come off hard, it literally in my work could have traded to 5,000 within like a month,
Wow.
like
That's
just
incredible.
like that.
Wow.
And it could still do that down the road, but I think either way, it's going to it wants to retest this 3,035 number. So we'll look at that.
Now is that a
Um,
lot of money coming out of the market for safety? Moving to a safer.
I don't know. That's sort of one of the things I'm doing with Grok right now, just playing
Mm.
around with
Okay.
Grok and saying, if gold trades to this level, what do you
Mhm.
think the economic backdrop or the sort of the fundamental news flow reason would be for that?
Yeah.
So, it's not part of my model, but it's, interesting conversation.
Yeah, very interesting.
Um,
Mhm.
in general, prior to President Trump, there wasn't anybody in politics or especially the Fed or banking that wants to see a high gold price, right?
Sure.
It never was a good sign. It either
Mhm.
meant inflation
Yeah.
or you know head for the hills,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yep.
now as far as the big guys, I think this is one thing I hear some of the younger guys talk about that I don't think they really have studied the history of how deep certain markets are, or they wouldn't believe what they say.
Sure.
Gold can, sure, gold could melt up to a certain price level, but you know, the flight to safety by the biggest funds and the biggest money that's washing around the globe, it can't go hide in gold. It has to go
Mm.
hide in, the bond market, the notes,
Okay.
right?
Makes sense.
Because those are the only markets or currency markets. Those are the only markets that are deep enough to not cause a huge move
Yeah.
while you're trying to get into them or out of them, and
Gotcha.
also be large enough for you actually to be able to park a huge amount of money. You
Okay.
just can't do it in the gold or silver market.
You also
Um,
can't move it fast enough, right?
you just you could move it fast, but you'd literally make the price go up 1,000, 2,000 bucks in your face,
Okay.
right? And then
Jeez.
it just can't handle
Yeah.
when you start talking about the billions and billions and billions that people like to move around. Because you asked specifically about a panic. Um,
Mhm.
you know, they have to do it quickly and they have to move it someplace to where it doesn't have a huge effect
Gotcha.
on everything else. So, not that they wouldn't like it, but so for that reason, gold's never been something that like a former president in my lifetime, at least, has talked about like it was a good thing if it was going up. It's never been a good thing going up,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But like you said, maybe Trump has something up his sleeve here,
Yeah,
and
maybe.
maybe we have way more than we think we have,
Well, he seems
or
okay with weakening the dollar too, which is interesting, at least
well,
temporarily.
I mean that helps us with the exports. So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the only real benefit there. It's not going to be good for people who want to go on vacation someplace, but so if you think about all these levers he can pull. Um, Simultaneously or at different times in this delicate dance that he's trying to do along with Besant and all these other guys that are smarter than he is as far as some of this global macro stuff.
Yeah.
um, his goal here I would think, is to keep a close eye on inflation, right? Because
Mhm.
the deep state and his
Oh, yeah.
detractors on the Democrat side all want to pin anything is from egg prices to gas to anything on him, right? They would
Yes.
love to
Yes.
see high inflation so
Yep.
they can say, "See, we told you so." When you
Yeah.
stack tariffs, it's a third grader would understand this. Econ 101, we know this.
Mhm.
If they do things properly, if they avoid um, war with Iran and having
Mhm.
a bunch of oil facilities or um, shipping lanes closed down, and they
Mhm.
avoid crude oil, which by the way, my crude oil model looks really dangerous right now. So I'm really worried about what might happen with Iran. But anyway, if you think about Trump and Besant playing a game of Monopoly,
Mhm.
they would want to somehow force crude oil prices lower because
Yes.
it's such a huge input and transportation cost affecting inflation.
And that affects everything. I mean,
Absolutely. So if there's
yeah.
literally one lever that he can pull hard, he would love to see crude oil,
Mhm.
50, $60.
Yeah.
Um, he'd love to see that. And
Really interesting. It made me think that maybe Trump knows it's safe now to get the rates down. He seems more he seems much more interested in making Main Street happy with prices and interest rates than he does Wall Street. And I wonder if he's just got a perfect storm brewing. Because if he gets energy prices down, that obviously be really good for Main Street and could cause some deflation at
yeah,
some point.
I mean, to me, that should be the major focus. That should be the reason that we don't want to go start some shitstorm with Iran.
Yeah, I don't think
Um,
we're going to. I think Trump's gonna stay out of it, but I think they want him to, the deep
oh,
state
for
globalist
sure.
types. Mhm.
And
They're
and
really pushing it.
they could try to force his hand. I
Absolutely.
think he's probably when Trump took office and crude oil prices started to move aggressively lower before
Mhm.
this news, you know, with Iran started to put sort of a bid back under crude oil.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saudis were helping him.
Yes. Yeah.
They
Absolutely
could
not.
behind the scenes, just at their trading desks and
Mhm.
elsewhere, help him uh, pin oil in the 50 to 60 range as a favor
Yeah.
while he tries to go through this
Well, he's got
tariff.
a good relationship with the Saudis too. A lot of people forget, but that was one of the first big foreign policy things he did, and when he in his first term, is he helped clear out all the Saudi princes that were like in criminal, and he helped get the I can't remember his name, but the one who's in charge now, he helped him get in,
Yeah.
and so he's got a good relationship with them right now.
Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, it's really interesting. Well, Bam, before I let you go, there was one thing I did want to talk to you about because you show this all the time, and we don't need to take long. but my audience does not know this, but your grandfather was an amazing man, and you told me the craziest thing the other day about a tie to the movie Forrest Gump. Now, you got to share at least 5 minutes on this, 10 minutes, because I think people need to know just the past you have and this incredible connection you have to your grandpa, Joe Savoldi, correct?
Yeah. Yep. Joe Savoldi, jumping Joe Savoldi. Yeah. So we moved to Alabama when I was in the 6th grade. My dad bought a car dealership. My dad was an executive for Chrysler Corporation at
Mhm.
their headquarters in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. And then we made that move, and sort of as a publicity thing, and just because it's interesting, the local sports writer at the time interviewed my dad about his father, Jumping Joe Savoldi,
Mhm.
who was a Notre Dame All-American fullback for Newt Rockne at Notre Dame. They won 2 national championships undefeated, and then he went on to become a pro football player for George Halas at the Chicago Bears, and then a professional wrestler who invented the flying drop kick that you see every day all over the world now, and then became a spy and special ops spy for the OSS during World War II, and was involved in a couple of like the most high level missions that whole organization pulled off. So he comes in and he does the interview with my dad, and then years later, Forrest Gump comes out, the book, the movie much more successful than the book until after the
Yeah.
movie. Then people went and bought the book.
Uh-huh.
Well, if you read the book, you know that Forrest Gump was also a professional wrestler who did the drop kick. And so one day, just for the hell of it, I put some information. Well, first I took a picture of the newspaper article that I have from the Birmingham News. Keep in mind that Winston Groom, the is this Groom or Broom? Winston Groom, the author of Forrest Gump.
Oh, I don't remember.
Let's see if it's Groom or Groom. Winston Groom.
Groom. Okay.
So yeah, he died in 2020. But so Winston Groom was a writer and from Alabama, and so very likely would have read this article in the Birmingham News, right?
It's wild. Yeah.
And the other rumor about my grandfather was that he was really stupid, that he was so dumb he had to write the plays on his thigh pad in chalk. Um, and in reality, what it was that he played football for such a tiny little high school. His
Uh-huh.
coach was the English teacher, and all of a sudden he's playing for the most complex offense on planet Earth, Newt Rockne,
Oh,
right?
wow. Okay. Yeah.
And my grandfather had only been in the country for a handful of years. He moved here when he was 12.
Okay.
So anyway, he probably did have a couple plays written down, and he also, it's true that his Italian quarterback Frank Corridio used to literally, sometimes when my grandfather would forget a play, would have to talk to him in Italian dialect that only the 2 of them would understand, and basically tell him which way he's going or whatever. But once my grandfather was brought into the OSS, he was I've seen the paperwork, and I went and got a bunch of declassified documents. He was rated as highly intelligent. He spoke 4
Mm.
languages
Oh,
fluently, and
wow.
on and on and on. But if you think about this story about Forrest Gump, he's this guy that was supposed to be really dumb but
Mhm.
functional, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you just switch out playing for, the most famous college football coach of all time, Newt Rockne at Notre
Mhm.
Dame, with Bear Bryant at the University of Alabama, and you're a
Sure.
running back and you're an All-American and you meet multiple presidents, check
Yeah.
that box, right?
Wow.
Forrest didn't play pro football, but he became a pro wrestler and did the drop
Mhm.
kick, and then he became a war hero in Vietnam. He started his own business, Forrest Gump Shrimp. My grandfather started his own business, an energy drink
Wow.
company, and anyway, so you go down the whole list. I fed the information into Grok, and he said, based on everything you gave me, there's a 70 to 80% chance that Forrest Gump was based on your grandfather, Jumping Joe Savoldi.
That's so incredible. Which presidents did he meet?
He met, who'd he meet? He met, Roosevelt, Truman, and Eisenhower. I mean, he was on his on the declassified documents I have.
Mhm.
Um, he was sent on one of his most important missions at the request of General Eisenhower. So he met Eisenhower,
Wow.
both, worked with him over in Italy during the war, and then again when he was president. But yeah, so I'd have to look. The president during 1929 and 30 met that one, and then met. I assume he probably met Truman too. I don't know.
Wow, that's
And then he was in
incredible.
the CIA for a very short period of time. In my opinion, he saw some things that he
Didn't like.
made him believe he would not love that as a career
Mm,
opportunity. So he was sort of in and out in a 6 month period, and then became a went back to school, finished out his college degree, got a teaching degree, and became a high school science teacher in a small town in Kentucky, and then mentored young kids through the court system um, who were juvenile delinquents, and part of their sentence from the judge was to join Mr. Savoldi's. It was a weightlifting, boxing, and wrestling club, and they would go around and compete with other kids around these small towns in Kentucky.
mhm.
And so that would be the sentence, along with their punishment. They had to go, and he would try to mentor them and you know um, turn their life around.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I always was intrigued because I'd see you post stories about him and pictures, and then when you sent me the Forrest Gump story, I was like, "Oh my god, we gotta talk about this." It's just incredible.
Yeah,
Well, Bam.
I was working with one author. It was funny a
Mhm.
long time ago. A guy that was wanted to write the book, and I broke things off with him. But um, I started to before this ever occurred to me. I was, his life story is so long and so complex that especially like the screenplay that I worked on with a professional screenwriter who's been
Mm.
produced by Mel Gibson.
Oh, wow.
The challenge was, how do you fit all this into a story? Do we want to just take one part of it? And that's what
Mm.
Hollywood wanted to do years ago. They just wanted to grab the, pro wrestler turned spy. And
Yeah,
it's very easy. But, I always thought about what my grandfather wanted to tell about the story. So I was trying to
sure.
incorporate this um, cycle of mentoring from Coach Newt Rockne at Notre Dame to my grandfather to all these kids he ended up mentoring, which, one of them becomes a school teacher, and on and on and on.
Yeah,
So anyway, um, I started thinking, wow, how can we do this? And I said, well, shit, Forrest Gump, that's a crazy story that they figured out a way to tell that story. So I started
yeah,
to look at
yeah.
that and try to model, both the book and the screenplay off of that. And this writer, I won't say his name because he was a pretty famous sports writer who's passed away now. But he said, I mentioned two things. I mentioned Seabiscuit, which is another period piece movie, and I
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
Forrest
uh-huh.
Gump. He says, JG, your grandfather wasn't a horse and he wasn't a retard. I'm like, what? You missed my point. So I'm like, okay, I get the message. You don't want me meddling in your writing. Here you go. Here's the material. Let me know what you think.
Oh, man, that's too
I'll leave
funny.
you on that one.
Well, I really appreciate it, Bam. Thank you for your time. This was awesome, and I'll have to have you back and eventually when things are going crazy again because I love your insights and with all that's going on in the markets and economy, it's really great to have somebody who has studied all this to talk to. So
Always
appreciate it.
fun, man. Always fun.
All
Patriots
right.
first, everybody. Try to support the president.
Amen. Amen. We do
We're
big
in
on
it
this channel.
together, so let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Always have to have fun. So, all right. Well, take care and we'll see you soon.
All right, brother. God bless.
Bye. Good night, everybody.